This picture is especially distinctive for me because of its history. Not only while it was being painted by Mondrian, but also since it was finished and even after it came into the collection of the National Gallery. It is a painting that was worked on and reworked. There were several different stages of Mondrian's work on this picture. When the composition was first finished, let's say in its first state by Mondrian, the lines that you see here were not as thick as they appear to be now. So they were much thinner. And we can actually make out on the surface the ways in which Mondrian thickened and increased those lines, changing the subtle relations of those areas, and of course then impacting the size of the planes with which those lines are juxtaposed. A photograph was made of that painting at that time, and it kind of had a life of its own. And for many years, people thought that that painting was a separate painting, was a different painting than this one. It wasn't until a very in-depth study was made in the conservation studios at the National Gallery that it was concluded that that other diamond-shaped painting with a very similar composition but much thinner lines was actually embedded in the later state, the current state of this painting, which speaks to the complexity of understanding Mondrian's work. Many people feel that because of its apparently simple geometry and its reductive range of colors, that Mondrian must be pretty easy to understand, that there isn't that much to Mondrian. The history of just this picture, the fact that it had a double life, so to speak, or a secret life, is interesting. It also speaks to Mondrian's mode of production, his process, which was one that involved change very often. Paintings that even he might have exhibited, and therefore you would think were finished. He may even have signed them. He could have dated them. Many of those pictures, and this is one of them, when it was returned to him or later in its life in his studio, after that fact, he would kind of reconsider and decide to make what might turn out to be significant changes. One of the distinctive things about Mondrian's work, it's very simple, but it is also very complex. The ways in which he adjusted this picture give us a hint of the care with which he wanted to pose what each size, what each color, what each shape was, what the linear structure was in relation to the whole. Once the painting was finished, and even since it's been at the National Gallery, it's been very broadly reproduced, including on the cover of a 1979 exhibition of Mondrian's diamond compositions, in which this was the star-featured object. With this picture, when it is reproduced, it just hits you as a tremendously powerful and very beautiful form. It is particularly in reproduction that this work, and works like it, have been especially influential in the popular sphere. And that sphere encompasses not only the kinds of things you might find in a gift store, but also the dresses, for example, very famous dresses by Yves Saint Laurent that were inspired not by paintings he saw, but by reproductions he saw in a book. Roy Lichtenstein made two paintings which he called Non-Objective 1 and Non-Objective 2, made some prints of the same subject, and they were very recognizably inspired by Mondrian, but they were not inspired by paintings that Lichtenstein saw, which doesn't mean he had never seen a Mondrian painting, but he was especially interested in Mondrian in reproduction. This painting is especially exemplary, both of the tremendous interest of the object itself and what can be learned by careful study of the object, even with the bare naked eye, but also in a conservation lab. So on the one hand, the history of this painting, but also because of its graphic power and so on, it's also exemplary of the circulation of Mondrian's style continuing today.